Hi, I'm Paul from West Country Wanderings. Today we're going to have an explore on the southwest coastal path. We're about 12 miles to the east of Plymouth and about 18 miles to the west of Dartmouth. Just to give you a rough idea, I'll stick a map up so you've got a better idea. And so we're on the south coast here, and we are going to explore a ruined church today. We're just coming up to Stoke Beach. You can just see partly grey, sandy, shingly beach behind me. It's quite a well-known beach to Plymouthians. As I say, we're only about 11-12 miles from the city of Plymouth. There is also a large caravan park, but you can't see it from the shot where I'm standing at the moment. It is a little bit further around. It's quite an exclusive little site. It's very quiet here. Although the car park, the National Trust car park I've parked in at Stoke Point, has been quite busy today because you can access lots of different coastal paths and routes from the car park at the very top of the hill. The name of the church is called, well, it goes under two names. It's sometimes known as Revelstoke Church. It's also known as the Church of St. Peter the Poor Fisherman. And we're going to be uncovering as to why this church was built here at this pretty remote location, bearing in mind there is no village here. I've just come to the rear of the church and we'll go inside and have a look at what remains of the church shortly. And I've been looking at the gravestones here. The majority date from the mid-19th century, and there is something curious about these gravestones which strikes me. I've been through many, explored many gravestones over the years, and when you look at the names, quite often a few of the stones will tell you the location of where the person is from, the name of the village or the town, where they originated from, or perhaps where they died and the body may have been returned to their place of birth or where they grew up. I cannot find any mention of any place at all or on any of the gravestones that are here. And as we said, we don't really know why this church was built at this precise location, because apart from the caravan park, which is obviously a much later addition, there is nothing else here. There is no evidence of any settlement at all. And as I said, these gravestones, a lot date from the mid-19th century, which is a comparatively recent time. So it remains strange to think that all these people were buried at this particular location. Now, the next nearest village to this church here at Revelstoke is over at Nos Mayo, which is approximately 2 to 3 miles from here. However, that church was not built until the mid-19th century. Looking at the dates of the gravestones, I can't see anything later than the date from when the Nos Mayo church was built. Now, there is a large estate at Revelstoke. There's also the Revelstoke carriage drive, and there are a number of hamlets between here and Nos Mayo. So it is highly probable that the people that lived in those hamlets would come to this church rather than travel to the next nearest church before the one at Nos Mayo was built, which is the one at Yampton. That's a much older church, and that's a quite considerable distance. It's approximately 4 to 5 miles from here. It's also a very difficult journey, whether you go over the land or by boat up the River Yam.
The church of St. Peter the Poor Fisherman stands on the edge of the cliff overlooking Stoke Bay, about 1.5 miles from Nosmail. It, nestled by the seashore right down on the rooks, grey and covered with ivy, and surrounded by quaint tombstones that seem to have been scattered haphazard in the thick grass and the nettles, to quote Maurice Baring, the writer. Something of a mystery surrounds this little church, built perhaps as Chaucer wrote his Canterbury Tales. Why should a chapel have been built in such an isolated situation? There are several popular theories. That there was once a settlement on the cliff which disappeared when the cliff eroded. That Revelstoke fulfilled the same function as St. Werburgh's at nearby Wembury, namely as a defensive stockade to protect the coast from attacks by Danes during the 8th century. The name Revelstoke is thought to be derived from the Middle English rearful, disturbance and stockade, which would bear out this last theory. However, the name could equally well mean simply a cattle farm belonging to the Revel family, the word top having meant cattle dairy farm. The Revels were a rich and important family, lords of the manor of Revelstoke, and, in the reign of Richard I, Richard Revel was Sheriff of Devon. Although there is a widely held belief that the church is of Saxon origin, historian W. G. Hoskin describes St. Peter's as an early 14th century church, with south aisle and porch added in the 15th century. The first written evidence of its existence does not appear until 1225, when it is mentioned in a charter. In the 15th century, the people of Revelstoke partitioned Bishop Edmund Lacy, Bishop of Exeter, for permission to have a burial ground attached to the chapel of St. Peter. Until this time, the dead had to be taken inland to Yampton. In their petition, the parishioners argued that from time immemorial they had enjoyed and received all sacramentals except for the burial of the dead at the chapel of St. Peter. The 3-mile journey to Yampton was often treacherous, and the whole parish of the aforementioned chapel extends for a great distance along the shore of the sea, and while the dwellers and inhabitants of the chapel happen to be engaged in different reliefs, burying the dead at the said parochial church of Yampton, the enemies of the king and realm will be able to row or sail in, and so in the meanwhile burn and spoil the whole district. They also made the point that they relied on the skill and toil of their hands, and could not afford the time away from their work necessitated by the burial of their dead at Yampton. The petition was granted. 4 centuries passed, kings and church lost power, and the Industrial Revolution boomed, but little is known of St. Peter's during this time, until in 1840 the church was badly damaged in a storm. The parishioners then began to use the Chapel of Ease in Nosmail, subsequently the village school and now the village hall, for their services. As travel to the mother church at Yampton was difficult, and as marriage services could no longer be held at St. Peter's due to the poor condition of the building, a licence was granted in 1862 to enable marriages to take place at the Chapel of Ease. However, despite the bad condition of St. Peter's, occasional services were still held there until 1869, when the building was deemed unsafe for use. This left the parish with no real church. Edward Baring, Lord Revelstoke, who, as Lord of the Manor in the late 19th century, had been responsible for a great deal of the building in the village of Nosmail, undertook to build a new parish church, also called St. Peter's Revelstoke, on a site facing across the river towards Holy Cross Church, Newton Ferrers. This was built in 1882. It is not known when the chapel at Stoke became known as St. Peter the Poor Fisherman rather than just St. Peter's, but perhaps it is reasonable to assume that it was so named at the time of the building of the new church so as to distinguish the two.
Well, I hope you enjoyed the tour of Revelstoke Church and uncovering what happened. Until next time, please join me again here on West Country Wanderings. I'm Paul, look after yourselves and stay safe. All the best.